So welcome to our study, which presently is then the study of what originally was known as the Vajrayana Shrine. And I think now the text is called Sacred Outlook, the Practice of Vajrayana. And I'd like to say I'm particularly delighted to present this material because I think we have something which is extremely valuable. We have here a short introduction to Vajrayana principle, a short, clear introduction to Vajrayana principle, which essentially connects all the dots in terms of how does Vajrayana fit in with the general Buddhist teaching. So last time, Trungpa was talking about the value, the power of the Vajrayana teaching, and its potential to transform, or we could even say identify and recognize enlightenment as it plays out within our own experience, our everyday world. And yet also making very clear that this quality of magic is not contingent on anything supernatural or some sort of promise of instantaneous enlightenment. It is very much founded on the general logic of the Buddhist path. But this is then what Trungpa is going to be presenting in the following. Incidentally, also today is the anniversary of the passing of Khandro Tsering Chödrön, who was very important for the whole Khyentse lineage. Of course, she was the consort of Gyalmen Khyentse Chögyam Lodrö, or we could say Khyentse Chögyam Lodrö was her consort, however you like to put it. But she's also been recognized, or was generally regarded as somebody who was very important for many masters. I remember His Holiness Sakya Trinzen praising her as a tremendous inspiration. I know she was very great inspiration for Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, very close with Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. So today we're commemorating her passing. This is a picture taken in I think this was taken in Tibet, but I'm not entirely sure. Anyway. So we're going to look at, again, the way that Vajrayana fits in with the general Buddhist teaching. So the heading here is egolessness and compassion. So Trungpa says, a brief discussion of fundamental Buddhism as well as of the Mahayana path is necessary here, so it will be clearly understood that Vajrayana is not to be perceived as an external deity or force. This is sometimes rather difficult for Westerners to understand because of the Judeo-Christian belief in God. Buddhism is a non-theistic religion. There is no belief in an external savior. Non-theism is synonymous with the realization of egolessness, which is first discovered through the practices of shamatha and vipassana meditation. And it's also difficult for Westerners who encounter Tibetan Buddhism, where there so often is references to the Sambhogakaya and the Nirmanakaya manifestations of enlightenment, very often in a language as if they exist as omniscient powers externally. We could say the Nirmanakaya manifestations of the Buddha manifesting in this world, and the various sages that manifest in this world, we could say they're external, but not in the sense of saviors. They're there as the compassionate manifestation of enlightenment. But the references to pure realms and so on, and the supplication to the Buddhas, to sages and so on, of course, very often you could say tallies in with or aligns with some of the Judeo-Christian beliefs. But all the time we're not engaging these as external saviors. We might engage them, as we're doing here within the context of Vajrayana, as what we could call personal deity, or invoking the principle of enlightenment on the basis of the external manifestation. But all the time, we are coming back to this principle of non-theism. And non-theism, in Trungpa Rinpoche's vocab, is essentially the absence of positing some absolute. So this doesn't just mean the notion of a creator, but it is also, as far as I can read it, also refers to the absence of some absolutisms in terms of the materialist view, in terms of asserting anything as possessing anything that has objective reality. So that also means beginning to believe in nothing. So in this way, non-theism really is a term, as I can read it, for the middle way that frees us from this condition that keeps us really in bondage, which is this dualistic attempt to objectify something externally, whether it's something or nothing. These become conceptual reference points that really refer to, that perpetuates this delusion of self and other dualism. And so this experience of freedom from reference points is not a philosophical principle, but it's something that is then discovered experientially through the practices of shamatha and vipassana meditation. So Trungpa Rinpoche says, in shamatha meditation, we work with breath and posture as expressions of our state of being. By assuming a dignified and upright posture and identifying with the outgoing breath, we begin to make friends with ourselves in a fundamental sense. When thoughts arise, they are not treated as enemies, but they are included in the practice and labeled simply as thinking. Shamatha in Sanskrit, or Shina in Tibetan, means dwelling in a state of peace, calm abiding. Through shamatha practice, one begins to see the simplicity of one's original state of mind and to see how confusion, speed, and aggression are generated by ignoring the peacefulness of one's being. This is the first experience of egolessness, in which one realizes the transparency of fixed ideas about oneself and the illusoriness of what one thinks of as I or me. I don't know about you, but when I read this, it's like you have the whole principle of meditation, the whole foundation of meditation and shamatha practice sort of summed up just in one paragraph. It's this is genuinely what we could call upadesha, pith instruction. It's every line here is so profound. We could take just this single paragraph as meditation instruction. This is the kind of things that should be written in gold. This is truly, truly profound. And then Trungpa Rinpoche continues, with further practice, we begin to lose the reference point of self-consciousness. And we experience the environment of practice and the world without bringing anything back to the narrow viewpoint of me. We begin to be interested in that, rather than purely being interested in this. The development of perception that is penetrating and precise without reference to oneself is called vipassana in Sanskrit, hlakdong in Tibetan, which means clear seeing, wider perspective. The technique of vipassana does not differ from shamatha. Rather, vipassana grows out of the continued application of shamatha practice. The clear seeing or insight of vipassana sees that there is no more of a solid existence in phenomena that there is in oneself, so that we begin to realize the egolessness of other. We also begin to see that suffering in the world is caused by clinging to erroneous conceptions about self and phenomena. We perceive that philosophical, psychological, and religious ideas of eternity and external liberation are myths created by ego mind. So in vipassana practice, egolessness is the recognition of fundamental aloneness, the non-theistic realization that we cannot look for help outside of ourselves. I've just spent the last couple of weeks teaching Madhyamaka, and I just wished I had stayed quiet and just read this single paragraph. This sums up the entire message of the Middle Way, where the Middle Way is, of course, the Middle Way teaching, as we have it in Indo-Tibetan Buddhism, operates with an apparatus of analysis that, you could say, analytically establishes this ontological, or you could say realistic scientific perspective of phenomena can never exist as an absolute conceptual reference point, or as an absolute principle, neither in terms of what we call the self of person or the self of phenomena. In neither of these can we find any reality. So this we do analytically. But the way that Trungpa Rinpoche lines it up with shamatha practice here is just brilliant, immensely brilliant. And if we study Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika, we can, Nagarjuna would say that the duality, or the cause of suffering, and the duality that throws us into samsara, is this construction of this in relation to that. And of course, we have this and that. We have self and other, but it's on the basis of self that we posit other. It's on the basis of other that we solidify self. It's on the basis of the duality between this and that we perpetuate this delusion. And what the Middle Way and what the Madhyamaka teaching seeks us to introduces us to is the flaw in doing this, the assumptions that come with this, in terms of, you could say, the natural habit that we have, that we're, you could say, born with, and also the philosophical or dogmatic elaborations on this delusion that we have in the world. So where vipassana can be presented in this analytical way that we have it in the Madhyamaka, we also have it as this pith instruction that we have here from Trungpa Rinpoche, which is not so much what we would call analytical meditation, but more what we call settling meditation. So we have what's called Chögyam and Jogam. Chögyam is the analysis that identifies analytically the absence of self, using intellect, using rational hard intelligence, and Jogam is the application that's premised on this insight, but also in Trungpa Rinpoche's approach here, premised on the experience of shamatha. So this here, Trungpa Rinpoche then points to how we, on the basis of shamatha, then we begin to simply experience this absence of this duality, and it leads us to breaking down the normal barriers between ourselves and the world, these unnecessary elaborations or conceptual constructions. And that's where we free ourselves from the sort of the crutches of clinging to self, or clinging to, like it says, philosophical, psychological, and religious ideas. So I'm sorry I'm going on about this to quite some extent, but it's just really an important point. And again, this is really just a praise of Trungpa Rinpoche's incredible insight. So he says, although the ground altogether, the Buddhist practice, the ground of the Buddhist practice is called the path of individual liberation, which is pratimoksha in Sanskrit and sosotaba in Tibetan. By practicing the disciplines of shamatha and vipassana, both in meditation and throughout one's life, we can actually liberate ourselves from personal confusion and neurosis, and free ourselves from causing harm to ourselves and others. We become inspired to commit ourselves fully to this path by taking refuge in the Buddha as the example of a human being who attained enlightenment by renouncing external help and working with his own mind, and in the Dharma, the teachings of egolessness that can be heard and experienced, and in the Sangha, the community of practitioners who follow the path by practicing as he did. We realize that in this spinning world of confused existence, we have had the rare good fortune to encounter the true path of liberation. So again, Here we have the foundation of what we're doing, and we're not engaging with Vajrayana before we make it perfectly clear how this is founded on the fundamental disciplines of Buddhism and the taking of refuge, as we've just seen it defined. Then Trungpa says, the Mahayana, or great vehicle, goes beyond the inspiration of individual liberation. On the whole, the Mahayana approach is basically one of working for the benefit of others with whatever the world presents. Therefore, it is an endless journey. As we embark on this journey without destination, our preconceptions begin to fall away. This experience of non-reference point, which initially could be just a momentary flash in one's mind, is the first glimpse of shunyata. Shunya means empty, and ta makes it emptiness. According to tradition, shunyata is empty of I and empty of other. It is absolutely empty. This experience of emptiness is realizing that there is no I as actor, no action, and no other to be acted upon. So this is the vast scope of the Mahayana, the greatness that does not retreat into a personal comfort zone of nirvana, but rather is endlessly engaging with the phenomenal world without in any way falling into confusion, and continually recognizing this ungraspable nature of phenomena that we refer to as shunyata. And again, here we come back to this I was referring to before in terms of the Madhyamaka, the absence of self in person and the absence of self in phenomena. What Trungpa Rinpoche here refers to as the emptiness of I and the emptiness of other. And it's also here, note that Trungpa Rinpoche says, this experience of emptiness is realizing that there is no I as an actor, no action, and no other to be acted upon. You very often in liturgies, in Mahayana and Vajrayana liturgies, at the end when you do dedication, you'll see this dedication where we dedicate the merit beyond the threefold concept or the threefold circle of subject, object, and action. For example, if we think of giving, there's no giver, no object of the giving, and no giving or no object involved. So this freedom from objectifying and conceptualizing these artificial constructs that become our reference point. This is the experience of emptiness that Trungpa Rinpoche is referring to here, and we, like I said, we see this so often referred to in the liturgies. Shunyata is not the nihilistic idea of nothingness or voidness. It is a complete absence of grasping and fixation, the complete egolessness of subject and object. It is therefore the absence of separation between self and other. The experience of shunyata provides tremendous room and tremendous vision. There is room because we see that there is no obstacle to going out, to expanding. And there is vision because there's no separation between oneself and one's experience. We can experience things clearly as they are without filters of any kind. This unbiased perception is called prajna, or discriminating awareness. Prajna is the sharpness of the perception of shunyata and the knowledge that comes from that perception. So in the principle that we're engaging here, which is seeing the world without the filter of self, this is then also where we're not putting in the artificial barriers and or styles of objectification of self and other. This is, like Trungpa Rinpoche says, it's the egolessness of subject and object. And this comes from this insight that sees through these deceptive constructions, and that is the quality of prajna. Trungpa Rinpoche says, in fact, prajna literally means superior knowledge or best knowledge, shirap. So that means, extreme or superior insight, intelligence. He says the highest knowledge that one can have is the knowledge of egoless insight, which begins as the experience of vipassana and matures in the Mahayana into prajna. The discriminating awareness of prajna sees that I and other are not separate, and therefore that the enlightenment of oneself and the enlightenment of others cannot be separated. Now, this could sometimes be interpreted as this sort of rather strange idea that if there's no difference between I and other, then we're sort of all one big soup where we're having a hard time navigating between am I thinking this or are you thinking this or whatever, which is more sort of a delusional, sort of a fantasy about a delusional condition that we're not talking about. There's a very clear, that discriminating actually also means discerning and the clarity of appreciating detail, both in regards to self and other. But the artificial construction that sets up the barrier and the objectification of self versus other is absent, and it's in that then the clarity of the qualities of phenomena then stand out vividly, but they do so very much because of this absence of this dualistic projection. So that is where we can say that there's no, that self and other are not separated. But it really just means that we can appreciate the natural display of both self and other without positing them as separate. There's not the, you could say, emotions of fear or the emotions of grasping or desire and all the toxic products of this basic ignorant delusion. So Trungpa just says, in this way, the perception of shunyata makes us altogether more wakeful and compassionate. We feel immense interest in others and immense caring for others, whose suffering is not different from our own. This is the beginning of the Mahayana practice of exchanging oneself for others. The notion of exchange means giving whatever assistance is needed. We extend our kindness, sanity, and love to other people. In exchange, we're willing to take on others' pain, confusion, and hypocrisy. We're willing to take the blame for any problems that might come up, not because we wish to be martyrs, but because we feel that there is an infinite reservoir of goodness and sanity to share. At the Mahayana level, egolessness is expanded into the path of selfless action, which goes completely beyond ego clinging. It is this surrendering of ego, which we shall discuss later, that makes it possible to enter the Vajrayana path. So again, we're not suggesting anybody becomes doormats or, like Trungpa just says, martyrs. It's just that this is a very rich situation, and there might be a few poor cousins that are still subject to their own sort of self-inflicted pain, but we're good with that. We're willing to engage with the world. We're not really sort of caught up in keeping a tab on who's giving what to who. It's good enough. We got plenty to give. So now Trungpa will discuss Vajra nature and the Yidam principle. He writes, when we let go of grasping and fixation completely, we're able to rest in the intrinsic goodness of our minds, and we regard whatever discursive thoughts arise, passion, aggression, delusion, or any conflicting emotions, as merely ripples in the pond of mind. Out of that, we begin to realize that there is a greater vision beyond grasping and fixation. That vision is very firm and definite. It is not definite in the style of ego, but it is like the sun, which shines all the time. When we fly in an airplane above the skies, we realize that the sun is always shining, even when it's cloudy and rainy below. In the same way, when we cease to hold to our identity, our ego, we begin to see that the non-existence of ego is a powerful, real, and indestructible state of being. We realize that, like the sun, it is a continuous situation that does not wax or wane. Now, I'd like to say that here, in this perspective that's being presented here in terms of not being overwhelmed by the ripples of mental factors, mental events, or emotions, conflicting emotions, the kleshas. Not being overwhelmed by that is something, in particularly then in Trungpa Rinpoche's style of teaching shamatha vipassana, simple sitting meditation. In that we already there have this approach of Mahamudra, of Vajrayana, in the sense that we are not trying to go into a particular place of peace, but rather there is an accommodation of whatever arises. So just to say that when we begin to become familiar with the Vajrayana perspective, we see how much of the Vajrayana is really present within Trungpa Rinpoche's presentation of what could be, you could say, designated or labeled Hinayana practice. And in fact, then we discover that Hinayana practice is not really Hinayana practice as it's taught by Trungpa Rinpoche. So even though it doesn't have those big words that we sometimes see in Vajrayana meditation instruction, the implication in the sitting practice that Trungpa Rinpoche teaches, in fact, aligns itself with the Vajrayana ethos of the Vajrayana spirit. And so in the practice of letting go with the ordinary conceptions that arise, simply labeling thoughts, thinking, this is where this, you could say, very sweet romantic notion of the thoughts just being ripples on the pond of the mind, which for most of us is not that easy. Actually, from the get-go in the teachings of Trungpa Rinpoche's meditation instruction, we are actually training in doing exactly that. So it's with that foundation, really, that it's not in any way frivolous or wishful thinking that we now speak about this perspective of this aerial perspective of the experience of wakefulness as being always present, regardless of the degree of confusion that might sort of run superficially through our mind like ripples. It's very much a perspective that has been engaged from the very start. And this is also this where we can appreciate the profundity of Trungpa Rinpoche's meditation instruction right from the very start. So he says, this state of being, referring then to this indestructible, unconditional state that we familiarize ourselves with through the path, through the discipline of the Hinayana and the discovery of Shunyata in the Mahayana context, this experience of compassion and vastness as something that is always there, as an unconditional ground that's basic to who we are, what we are. This state, Trungpa Rinpoche writes, this state of being is called Vajra nature. Vajra or Dorje in Tibetan means indestructible, or having the qualities of a diamond. Vajra nature is the tough, immovable quality of egolessness, which is the basis for the Vajrayana path. The term Vajrayana itself means vehicle of indestructibility, the Vajra vehicle. The Vajrayana is also called the Tantrayana or Tantric vehicle. Tantra, or Gyu in Tibetan, means continuity or thread. Vajra nature is the continuity of egolessness or wakefulness, which, like the sun, is brilliant and all-pervasive. So what we're saying is the Vajrayana takes Buddha nature as the vehicle. In Vajrayana, the method is that which we are aspiring to through the whole path, which is enlightenment. That objective or result of the path, that is the very method in Vajrayana. So we would say Vajrayana is the resultant vehicle, or the vehicle that takes the result as the path. And what we're referring to as the result is not something that's created, but it is exactly what Buddha nature is. It's the result of elimination, which means delje in Tibetan, which means that which you could say becomes manifest when it's no longer obscured. It is like the sun in the sky. It's like in the Buddha nature teaching, we talk about these 9 examples of how Buddha nature is always present. So when we talk about the result of the path, it is not something that's constructed. It is that which is unveiled. And this nature has always been there. So this is what we then refer to as the continuity that runs throughout confusion and wakefulness. It is this principle of Tantra. So Trungpa says the deities of the Vajrayana are embodiments of Vajra nature. In particular, the deities called Yidams are important for the practice of Vajrayana. The best translation of Yidam that I have found is personal deity. Actually, Yidam is shortened form of the phrase Yi Ki Tamsik, which means sacred bondage of one's mind. Yi means mind, Ki means of, and Tamsik means sacred word or sacred bondage. Tamsik, which in Sanskrit is samaya, will become important in a later discussion of the sacred commitments of the Vajrayana. Mind here refers to Vajra nature, the basic sanity and wakefulness of one's being, freed from ego clinging. The Yidam is the manifestation of this enlightened mind. It is the Yidam who connects or binds the practitioner to the enlightened sanity within him or herself. So according to the Tantric understanding, the Yidam is the non-theistic deity who embodies one's innate Vajra nature, rather than any form of external help. So again, this is an extraordinary single paragraph which sums up and clarifies possibly the single stumbling point of, you could say, the general culture, the general audience, and particularly even within Buddhism, the single stumbling point that actually prevents so many Buddhists and non-Buddhists from understanding what we're doing in Vajrayana, because there is the inevitable misinterpretation and misunderstanding that Yidam has something to do with some external power. And tragically, within Buddhism, then there will be persons who think that Yidam is something other than the basis of all Buddhism, which is the uncovering of this wakefulness within. Yidam is simply just that wakefulness itself. So it is synonymous with Vipassana. It's synonymous with Chan. It's synonymous with Zen. It's synonymous with everything that is the, you could say, the nature of the Buddhist path everywhere in all traditions. So it's not even as if there's any Buddhist tradition that actually doesn't operate with this principle. But in the Vajrayana, then, with this approach of yoga and this approach of engaging this nature through the form of the Yidam, which we will see, is a particularly skillful way in which we engage the actual appearing reality of enlightenment, in, you could say, in the form of the manifest physical, the appearing the energy, sound, speech, and of course also mind. So we talk about then how Vajrayana engages body, speech, and mind. And this is then condensed into this is embodied then in the Yidam principle. We actually have a way of yoga, a way of connecting with this body aspect of enlightenment. Trungpa says there are many thousands of tantric deities, but in the Karmakaju lineage, Vajrayogini is a particularly important Yidam. When a student has completed the preliminary Vajrayana practices called the Ngondro, he or she receives abhisheka or empowerment to begin Yidam practice, in which they identify with a particular deity as the embodiment of his or her innate wakefulness or Vajra nature. In the Karmakaju tradition, Vajrayogini is the first Yidam given to a student. In order to understand the Vajrayogini principle in any depth, a discussion of the stages of Vajrayana practice through which a student is introduced to the Yidam is necessary. And of course here Vajrayogini is the center of the discussion, but this applies equally to all Vajrayana deities. So when we talk about the many thousands of tantric deities, they can all be explained in the same way that we're going to be explaining it here in terms of Vajrayana. Trungpa Rinpoche is going to be presenting some very general principles about deity in relation to Vajrayana, but this applies universally. So, devotion. In the Buddhist tradition, relating to a teacher is not hero worship. The teacher is appreciated as an example of living Dharma. When entering the Buddhist path, the practitioner respects the teacher as a wise man or woman or elder. The teacher in the Mahayana is called the Kalyana Mitra, or spiritual friend. He or she is a friend in the sense that they are willing to share one's life completely and to walk with one on the path. He is truly an example of the Mahayana practice of exchanging oneself for others. At the Vajrayana level, we begin with faith in the teachings and the teacher because we have already experienced the truth and the workability of the teachings for ourselves. Then, with the discovery of Vajra nature, faith begins to develop into devotion, which is mögu in Tibetan. Mö or möpa means longing, and gu or gupa means respect, where we develop tremendous respect for the teacher and a longing for what he can impart because we see that he is the embodiment of Vajra nature, the embodiment of wakeful mind. At this level, the teacher becomes the guru. He is the Vajra master, the one who has mastered Vajra truth, indestructible truth, and who can transmit that Vajra power to others. However, the Vajrayana can be extremely destructive if we are not properly prepared to receive these teachings. Therefore, in order to practice the Vajrayana, we must have a relationship with a Vajra master who completely understands the practitioner and the practice, and who knows how to bring the two together. So the entire path is premised on us being open to wisdom, and we do this initially with the teacher as someone who embodies wisdom as we conventionally think about it, like a wise person, then as somebody who's very much there and exemplifies how not to set up barrier. And this is where we would say the teacher is then demonstrates the complete willingness of exchanging self and other, and then having some experience of sanity and the freedom from normal ego confusion. Then there's an appreciation for the vastness of the teacher, which is then results in this quality of bhakti or devotion, mögu, longing and respect. Trungpa Rinpoche would say möpa then meaning interest, seeing that there's something wonderful taking place, and then gupa, humility. So interested humility, but then also here respect. This is quite important because devotion sometimes can have a little bit, a sort of a sense of this hero worship or sort of objectification in that there's a seva out there that we're devoted to and so forth. So it's important to understand really how the relationship with the teacher is premised on appreciating the Buddha nature that we already possess. And so that's where something like longing can take place in the sense of we have this ourselves and we long for it. So it's not just about objectifying the teacher. So the teacher is appreciated as being this embodiment of Vajra nature. So Trungpa Rinpoche says one's relationship with the Vajra master involves surrendering oneself to the teacher as the final expression of egolessness. This allows the practitioner to develop fully the threefold Vajra nature: Vajra body, Vajra speech, and Vajra mind. The maturation of devotion into complete surrender is called Lote Lingyur in Tibetan. Lote means trust, Ling means completely, and Kyur means abandoning. Lote just basically means that you lend yourself to, trust, and then Lingyur meaning abandoning or letting go. So lote lingyur means to trust completely and let go, to abandon one's ego completely. Without such surrender, there is no way to give up the last vestiges of ego, nor could the teacher introduce the yidam, the essence of egolessness. In fact, without such devotion to the teacher, one might attempt to use the Vajrayana teaching to rebuild the fortress of ego. So the introduction to Vajrayana is, we could say, an advanced stage that requires a lot of preparation, and it's through that preparation that we can then appreciate the brilliance and the greatness of the teacher. And it's on the basis of that then that the teacher can introduce something which is immensely powerful and yet completely free of ego. And we understand then the yidam as the very, like Trungpa says, the essence of egolessness. I'm looking at my watch because I'm thinking this is such a full meal. And like I say, almost every one of these paragraphs is so rich that we could almost just make each of these paragraphs a subject of a lot of contemplation. So so in some way, just having experienced something so good, extraordinary, I think we can just begin I'm going to see if there's any questions at this point. Okay. Somebody says, Emma Ho. To me, deity and yidam have been a vague concept. I have several questions. One, is yidam a smaller concept than deity? Well, I'll answer that first. Okay, in particular, the deities called yidam seem to say so. No. Deity, yidam, hra, all of these refer to the nature of reality. They refer to the awakened perspective, awakened wisdom, and it is synonymous with Buddha nature. It's synonymous with primordial purity. It's synonymous with wisdom. It's synonymous with vipassana. It's synonymous with this condition of egolessness that is endowed with all the qualities of compassion, and it is really what we are engaging on the path. But what we're doing here is engaging with this through the yoga of, you say, embracing our physicality with this perspective. Yidam is also the unity of appearance and emptiness. It's this quality that permeates all of reality. But where in the general Mahayana, where we approach this in the form of simply an understanding that phenomena cannot be grasped, the freedom from conceptual constructs, which is how we understand the Dhammadhatu, is here engaged in a practical way that embraces physicality and all of the phenomenal world. So that's where Yidam becomes the key, really, to seeing enlightenment in all appearances. So then that was your question one. Okay, your question two. When you define Yidam and deity, is Tara Yidam or deity? How about Guru Rinpoche, Mamo, etc., etc.? Yes, they're all Yidams. They're all deities. Guru Rinpoche, Tara, Manjushri, Mamo, Ekajati. Yes, all of these. So we talk about the deities of the three roots, Guru, Deva, and Dakini. So this is key, really, in the whole Vajrayana, the Vajrayana path. So all of these are, if you like, Yidams. And also you would say, well, don't we have Guru, what is it called, Lama, Yidam, and Dakini? Well, here we're just talking about all of them under one. So they're all the practice of engaging this yoga, body, speech, and mind, engaging the enlightenment through the yoga, body, speech, and mind. How can the Vajrayana teacher know me and then assign a practice that pulls the rug out under my feet? If I'm one of the thousands of students sitting down in the audience, even during an advanced teaching. Yeah, this is an important question, and that's why I'm very often addressing that, and very often sort of repeating how we might think that if we're sitting on the on the 87th row amidst thousands of students, then how could we actually assume that the Vajrayana teacher knows us? And that is where we are assuming that we already have some foundation of the path and the appreciation of the Dharma. And our devotion for the teacher shouldn't be less if we are sitting on the 87th row. And if we might have the perception that the teacher could never know us, we might never have talked with the teacher. That happens. But the thing is, the presumption here with the Vajrayana is very much that we have some foundation in which we've seen the truth and have this the appreciation of Buddha nature, where we don't really regard the teacher as just an external person, but rather we regard the teacher as a reflection of our Buddha nature. And so that's why we would say anything that happens is the teacher's blessing. So if what is happening is that I'm sitting at the very last row amidst thousands of teachings, so be it. This is the teacher's compassionate manifestation. And so we take this as a teaching. And being sitting on the last row, well, to be honest, we tend to probably feel more the rug pulled under our feet than if we were giving a sort of VIP seating up in the front. So in that sense, it works very beautifully in terms of addressing the issue of our ego. But we really, the bottom line is that we're no longer objectifying the teacher as an ordinary person. And that's also why in the Vajrayana, we view the teacher as Vajradhara or as Guru Rinpoche or as Yeshe Tsogyal, however we might see the teacher, as essentially as deity, as we've been discussing. So that pure perception then leaves us, you could say, a much wider scope of the teacher. So that way we sometimes think, oh, where's the teacher now? Oh, he's in Nepal, and that's why we're just talking about the symbolic teacher, relative teacher, but the real teacher is continually trying to show us or rather our teacher's role is to show us what the real teacher is, which goes far beyond that. And so as much as we have the Niyama-Nikaya teacher who might be here or there, then that's actually just, you could say, the tip of the iceberg. And the real teacher is then Vajradhara, is then the principle of enlightenment. So that's where we should have a big mind when we're approaching the principle of the Vajrayana and the Vajrayana teacher. Okay. Someone's saying this was the most amazing reading I ever heard. I tend to agree. Wonderful, concise, extraordinary. Thank you. Which is the text we are reading? Yes, that's right. The Heart of the Buddha. That's right. I think it's one of the last chapters in the Heart of the Buddha. Yeah. Hi. The panic that Rinpoche mentions in Journey Without Goal and other of his teachings means our deluded state, or is it more related to the gap when we're open and present, and panic is some kind of losing ground or reference within this gap? Well, yes, that is where the panic of groundlessness is seen as just an opening to the. If we're having that, that's a good sign. You famously have the story of the students who would have a heart attack when they heard the Heart Sutra and so on, and the panic is something that's seen as predictable and acceptable, and it's really just that we're beginning with it's growing pains essentially that we're having, that we would like to hold on to a little safe comfort zone, and in fact we're being exposed to this great vast vista, and that's where we appreciate this vastness, but with it comes this panic that it's very big. We're going out of our comfort zone. We're experiencing this absence of ground. Yeah. So surrendering to the teacher is surrendering to our own experience. I always feel like I would have a hard time to completely trust the teacher guru if I did have a personal relationship. Yeah, it's surrendering to our own experience of shamatha and vipassana and shunyata and compassion. So that's where these experiences are not really experiences, but they're experience of you could say, a firm foundation of unconditional truth. So that's what we are surrendering to. And the teacher is then seen as the expression of this, you could say, unconditional ground of sanity. So there's the presence of the physical teacher to whom we could have a personal relationship. Maybe it's up close, but maybe also from the back row, however it might pan out. But that is also that is a personal relationship. But again, that's just the tip of the iceberg. And the appreciation for the teacher is very much goes hand in hand with this experience of the sanity that we experience through the practice of the path. And somebody says, "Oh, this text here is really like the key to what." She says, "This text gives me the key I've been searching for." Yeah, me too. This is a wonderful, wonderful, extraordinary text teaching. Okay, we have a few minutes more. Nobody's asking any questions. Okay, we'll read a little bit. Here's one. See, what an amazing teaching. Indeed, indeed. Okay, Ngundro. This should sound familiar to some of us. It seems that we always come back to that. Trungpa says, in order to develop proper devotion and surrender, a student of the Vajrayana begins with the practice of Ngundro, the foundation practices that are preliminary to receiving Abhisheka. Ngun means before and Dro means going. In the Kamakaju lineage, there are 5 practices that make up Ngundro. Prostrations, the recitation of the refuge vow, the Vajrasattva mantra practice, the mandala offering, and the practice of Guru Yoga. These are called the extraordinary foundations. So Ngundro is what prepares us, and we actually have within Ngundro practice all the aspects of, you could say, the essential foundations of the Buddhist teaching. The foundational aspects of committing to truth and the path, and appreciating those that are wandering, practicing or journeying the path, taking refuge. The vastness of this, which is then the Mahayana commitment to bodhicitta, which in the Kaju Ngundro we're referring to here is implicit in the refuge vow. And then purification and accumulations. These are also essential. Mantra and mandala. And then finally the culmination is the practice of the Guru Yoga. So this is then on the basis of the Guru Yoga, we're introduced to this co-emergent wisdom and really the foundations for the Vajrayana approach, or what we will be looking at in terms of Yidam practice and so on. In the Nyingma, it's the same thing, but we lump prostrations and refuge together as one. You do the prostrations with the refuge vow, and then you have a separate category, which in the Kaju Ngundro is included within the refuge vow, but you have a separate section which is then the Bodhisattva vow, or the bodhicitta, and the rest is the same. So it says, Ngundra is the means of connecting oneself with the wisdom of the Guru and the Guru's lineage. In prostration, as the starting point, one is humbling oneself and expressing one's gratitude for the example of the Vajra Master and the lineage forefathers. One visualizes the Gurus of the lineage, including one's own Guru, in the form of the primordial Buddha. Over the course of many practice sessions, the practitioner prostrates to the lineage 108,000 times, while reciting the refuge vow 108,000 times. In that way, one reaffirms one's commitment to the basic path of discipline and renunciation, and at the same time expresses surrender to the Vajrayana teachings and the Vajra Master. Through prostrations, one catches one's first glimpse of the lineage. So again, here we're talking about doing this a number of times. We say 100,000 times, then sometimes we say 108,000 times, sometimes 111,000 times. And then recently with Tsongsa Khensa's Ngunduga, then we are doing this more in terms of time. I think we're doing it 360 hours of essentially doing prostrations. So we would say prostrations is what eliminates pride. It's what opens us up to the, like Trungpa Rinpoche talks about here, to the teacher and to the lineage. Then mantra, which refers to the Vajrasattva mantra. Mantra practice leads to a closer experience of the lineage wisdom. It allows one to work directly with obstacles and psychological obscurations and to realize that defilements are temporary and can be overcome. The deity Vajrasattva, literally Vajra being, is visualized as a youthful white prince, who is both the essence of Vajra wisdom and the wisdom body of one's guru. In contrast, the practitioner's own body is visualized as being filled with impurities of all kinds, physical, mental, and emotional. While reciting the mantra of Vajrasattva 108,000 times, one visualizes that one's body is slowly cleansed of these impurities by the action of Vajrasattva. By the end of a practice period, one visualizes oneself as possessing the same pure nature as Vajrasattva. The point of mantra practice is therefore to recognize one's inherent purity. So Vajrasattva practice is the place of coming clean and becoming true to who one really is. So it's not about good versus evil, but it is very much about the practical obstruction we have with the obscurations. So we talk about cognitive obscuration, emotional obscurations, obscurations of habits and emotion, obscurations of karma. And these are then the impurities that Trungpa Rinpoche here refers to in terms of physical, mental, and emotional impurities. So these prevent us from seeing what we truly are. So with the mantra practice, Vajrasattva practice, then we uncover this purity. Okay, we'll call it a day. Thank you very much. Through this virtue, may all beings throughout existence awaken together without a single being left behind. In the pure realm of the luminous essence, the ground of the great perfection, may they remain inseparable from the kayas and wisdoms. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we're born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night, realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning. May we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together. Thank you.